Hello, welcome back to Real Opinions. I'm back here again on my own for a review of M. Night Shyamalan's latest film, The Visit. This guy keeps making films. No matter what people say about them, he keeps coming back. So I guess you've got to kind of give him points for consistency. So yeah, The Visit. It is a found footage horror movie made on a minuscule budget, partly funded by Blumhouse, the people behind Sinister and Insidious, and basically every popular horror film of the last 10 years since Paranormal Activity. Directed by the one and only M. Night Shyamalan, the guy that made The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable, and Signs, and The Village. Yeah, he made some really, really great stuff, but also some total shit. And I'll be honest, I really wanted to like this movie. The Sixth Sense was a major part of my childhood. It was one of the first films that really kind of made me interested in horror films. It made me really kind of understand what a horror film was as well. I was about 4 when that film came out. But this film is not good. I really, really wanted to like it. I know a lot of people have said that recently things like The Last Airbender and After Earth were really terrible because the budgets were so big and there was so much studio intervention, etc., that M. Night Shyamalan couldn't make the film he wanted to make. Well, this film has a budget of like 5 million. The creative control was completely in his hands, and it is still pretty terrible. The film kind of centers around this young family. A single mother kind of sends her 2 children off to stay with her estranged parents because they've got in touch with her and they want to see their grandchildren before they finally kind of move on and die. So she kind of begrudgingly sends them off on a train journey on their own to go see these grandparents who they've never met. And the framing for the whole thing, why it's found footage, the young girl decides she wants to make a documentary. So I guess it's not really found footage. I think M. Night Shyamalan himself has said this. It's not really found footage, it's more of a documentary. So there is kind of space for artistic shots of scenery and stuff. So she decides to make this documentary more for her mother's sake, to kind of bridge the emotional gap between her mother and her grandmother, which to some extent makes sense. And that kind of emotional side to the film actually does kind of work. Catherine Hahn plays the kid's mother. She's at the beginning and at the end, and she kind of shows up a little bit in the middle every now and again on like Skype conversations. And she is above and beyond the best thing about this film. At times, it actually feels like she's in a completely different film entirely because she delivers this pretty emotional and kind of quite grounded performance, which ties in with this more emotional arc overall. And that is actually a really good side to the film. It feels almost mature away from the kind of just jump scare horror that the rest of the film seems to be going for. But like I say, at the same time, it doesn't feel like part of this film at all. It feels like it's just been dragged out of something else entirely. And the rest of the film is just total crap, really. I mean, it is basically these 2 kids in their grandparents' house videotaping their grandparents doing weird things and trying to figure out why they're doing these weird things. There's quite a lot of humour in it, like intentional jokes. And that kind of ruins the whole atmosphere of the film as well. It drags the tone away from this kind of dreaded horror. Basically, what you need to make a really good horror is to put the audience on the edge of their seats. They're really scared when someone's even just reaching for a doorknob or doing something stupid like a doorbell rings. You need people jumping out of their skin at the most inane moments. And this film doesn't even remotely get there. The atmosphere is just never there in this film. It doesn't help that because it's this kind of documentary found footage thing, there is no score. But at the same time, the scares just aren't there. The humour element of it, this kind of like playful childish humour that shows up every now and again. The jokes themselves are pretty lame. Most of them don't hit, but that takes the dread out of the atmosphere of the whole film. You're never really scared or worried. You feel like everything could almost be a joke rather than a scare. So it's kind of doing this whole jack of all trades thing. It's trying to be a comedy and a horror film, and because it's trying to balance the two, it's never either. And so ultimately it just becomes really, really dull and boring, and you never really know what it's trying to do. It just kind of saunters through this existence of occasionally there's a jump scare or occasionally there's a really crummy joke, but there's never anything brilliant of either. I will say one thing, the 2 child actors in this film are actually pretty good. As far as child actors go, they weren't particularly annoying for extended periods of time. The girl in particular is actually really good. I don't know where she's from, I don't know what else she's been in, but she held the film together. But the little boy is just, at times he's okay, and at times he's relatively funny, but throughout the film, for some reason, he just keeps rapping, and I couldn't figure out why he kept rapping. It was like an ongoing joke that was just never funny, and it just felt really sad, and it felt like the sort of joke that would have been made like 10, 12 years ago. And that's the thing with this film. It feels like it doesn't quite understand that it's being made in 2015. If this film was made 10 years ago, then maybe it would be something a bit different, because there's kind of like hints of Blair Witch here and there, and there's hints of some other kind of relatively successful found footage horror films. But because this film was made after all of them, and it doesn't do any of them particularly well as the key films in the genre, like Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity or whatever, it just feels like a cheap knockoff, which is something very, very strange to say about an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Because most of his films are, as bad as they are, they're at least distinctive. They're terrible, but terrible for like these ridiculous reasons. Like, The Happening is a really, really bad film, but it's funny bad. It's filled with these crazy, stupid, ridiculous ideas. So it's terrible, but it's kind of terrible in an almost funny way. Whereas this is just nothing. This is just terrible in a truly terrible and dull way, the worst kind of way, the way that just really bores the pants off of you, because there's no kind of crazy ideas. They kind of hint at a few odd ideas here and there. I'm not going to spoil the ending of this film, especially when it comes to M. Night Shyamalan films. I feel like the ending is kind of half the fight, and I guess some people seem to be enjoying this film, so I don't want to completely ruin it for them. But at the same time, it kind of hints at these kind of crazy ideas here and there, but never really follows through with them. And the twist, I mean, it's no spoiler that there is a twist. It's an M. Night Shyamalan horror movie. They're basically all based around the idea of a twist. The twist is just so disappointingly vanilla. It's something that you can pretty much guess from the trailers or just even thinking about the concept of the film alone. And it didn't really come as much of a surprise. It felt kind of a bit obvious, to be honest. Very, very disappointing and frustrating to watch. Because at times I was almost begging for aliens or something crazy like that to show up, just to give the whole thing a bit of life. It just feels so dull and downtrodden. And I was waiting to be scared, I was wanting to be scared, and I never was. I was waiting to laugh, I was wanting to laugh, but I never did. To be honest, I'm just very frustrated and annoyed that The Visit is really quite terrible. At first I was just plain old angry, but now I'm just bored and a little bit depressed by it. So there you go. I just want to point out as well that I already tried to make this video yesterday and just got very, very angry whilst I was making it. Considering the budget and the scope and the creative control he had on this, there was literally no excuses for this being as absolutely god-awful terrible as it is. So this is kind of a more down-to-earth, grounded, genuine opinion on what the film's like. The Visit is truly unspectacular, actually kind of boring. Aside from a few decent, relatively chirpy performances, there's just nothing here. The Visit gets a 2 out of 10. It gets the extra point because the kids are kind of passable and the Catherine Hahn's quite good. Otherwise, there's just nothing to really enjoy here at all. In some ways, you've got to kind of respect M. Night Shyamalan because he keeps going back and keeps making films, despite what people say about them, despite what the amount of bad press and stuff he gets. He still finds a way to keep making what he wants to make, and he seems to be genuinely enthusiastic and passionate about what he's making. So I guess for him, in his own mind, he's doing quite well. But for everyone else, these films are just not good. And I gotta stress this, I really wanted The Visit to be good, but it's just terrible. So, thank you for watching, as always. Hopefully, M. Night Shyamalan will be back to make a legitimately good film in the near future. But until then, thank you for watching.